Welcome back to K24 this morning. My name is Shiko Kaitani, and of course, as always, we are looking out for you on social media just to get your feedback on our ongoing discussions right here on the show. At K24 TV is how you can reach us, and our WhatsApp number will be at the bottom of the screen. Should you wish to contribute, we will be sampling your feedback in just a moment. But we do have quite the topic for you today, and let's get your thoughts on it. We are still learning about the coronavirus. Research suggested that the virus can spread from people to animals in some situations, if you did know, especially after close contact with a person sick with COVID-19. There have been reports of animals being infected with the virus worldwide, and you may be wondering why we should focus on animals when in fact humans are suffering and we have enough challenges as they are of our own before we can even get to animals. Well, my guests today are here to tell us the importance of caring for community animals and just how it may even do you some good to own one. I want to start off by welcoming Dr. Emily Mudoga, who's here from the World Animal Protection. Karibu sana to the show.
Thank you, Shiko.
Looking lovely, by the way. I love the outfit. The jacket is mwah.
Thank you.
And then joining us via Skype is marketer and pet owner Renee Kamau. Renee, hi. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me here.
Okay, so who's that? Who's joining us on the show right next to you?
So this is Peanut Kamau, his only dog. We've had him for about 3 years.
Yeah.
He's lots of fun and yeah.
So Peanut even has a surname. It's Peanut Kamau, 2 names.
Yes, Peanut Kamau.
Okay, so Renee, we'll be getting to you in just a moment. But let me start off with you, Dr. Emily. And, you know, when we talk about the perception that generally people actually do have, you know, when it comes to animals, is that they're not necessarily a priority, especially during now, you know, this particular time of COVID-19. Why do you feel it's so important to discuss and actually focus on animals?
Unfortunately, as we said, people usually don't have a focus with animals. And right now you can understand, not only in Kenya, but even globally, with people out of work and at home, the needs for basic food, shelter, and clothing for the human being has gone up.
Yeah.
So now the animal tends to become secondary. But unfortunately, us who live with close proximity with animals, they have diseases that we can share between humans and animals. And if we do not put those priorities for the animals the way they should, we're opening these animals to getting these diseases, and when they become immune weaker or their welfare goes down and they get these diseases, it will eventually jump to the human being. And at the end of the day, that's another added cost on you.
Yeah. Okay. Renee, if you can hear me, there's also the perception that owning a pet is just a rich man's problem. People are looking at you and thinking, okay, that's one rich babe right there.
No, I mean, pets are companions. They are really good for a lot of things. You know, you can have them for security. Some are just good to have around. They're fun-loving. I mean, Peanut like really lifts my mood, you know, especially during this COVID period where, you know, you're doing a lot of social distancing. So he keeps me company, keeps me active. So no, it's not a rich man's thing to have a pet indoors.
Yeah. Would you describe, you know, being a pet owner as expensive? It's an expensive affair.
I would say I mean, when you commit to have a pet, of course it comes with costs. It's almost like having, I mean, a child in the house. You know, they have to have see a vet.
Yeah.
You know, for someone who's young and you travel occasionally, you have to have, you know, boarding facilities. You can't have them housed by one of your friends. They get sick. Yeah. You know, they need care, grooming, and whatnot. So it is a responsibility that you need to be ready to take up financially also. And it is manageable.
It is manageable. Dr. Emily, you've talked about your love for community animals, even in your bio. And it's just interesting to see how passionate you are about them. For those who probably may not understand what you mean by community animals, who are the community animals?
Basically, in the livestock or veterinary area, we divide animals into livestock, community, and working animals. Yeah. So now, community animals, we have like dogs and cats and people who have birds that they keep. So those ones are animals that literally become part of the family.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then we have the livestock, which is your basic donkey, your cow, your bee, your chicken, your duck. And then we have the working animals, which is like donkeys and camels. Some of these animals actually overlap categories. So that's how we define animals in basically.
Right, because some now have become part of the family and they are classified as working animals. But I guess you see a lot of that in the West. But when you look at, even through your work and what you do and, when you're advocating for animal welfare, what injustices would you say these animals go through?
Unfortunately, I say the injustices come in various areas. One is an injustice of ignorance, where most people don't understand what their animals need. Yeah. In the sense of food, shelter, healthcare. So it's not that they're depriving those animals knowingly, but it's from a point of ignorance. The other area we have is where we see truancy from the point of human beings, where a human being will outrightly go to injure or harm an animal just because they find it is fun. Yeah. Or they do not have, And the thing about it is that it's been studied that most of these people who have these traits, it is not hard for them now to actually use this trait on another human being. Absolutely. So in most countries you'd find people who have this trait, especially from the young age, to harm animals, they're usually watched in their growing up ages because quite a number of them end up in jail because they end up being
very true. Yeah, and in fact, a lot my co-hosts make fun of me about this because I tend to watch a lot of true crime. But what you would see a lot of psychologists saying is that when they look at a profile of a criminal and they go back as young as when they were toddlers, growing up, they literally used to punish animals. And people would say, oh, they did this to our cat, they did this to our dog. So it's almost like you can trace it back and it starts right there on how they used to treat animals when they were younger. Yeah,
it's true. And then the other area of mistreatment is where we have government and laws. Yeah. Because some of our laws, right now Kenya, we're at a place where we have redone our laws, so they're just about to finally be passed, is where the government doesn't have laws to protect these animals or even regulations for people to understand. So there's also a level where the government has a responsibility to help people and to protect the animals that they have.
Okay, okay. I'll engage you about that if there is even a legal framework in just a moment. But let me get back to Renee in just a moment. Renee, why don't you tell us a little bit about what your routine is like with Peanut, and what it takes to actually manage. Is it a he or her?
It's a he.
It's a he. Okay, what it takes to manage him?
Okay. Well, first, as I said before, having a pet is a lot of responsibility. You also have to adjust your lifestyle to accommodate the pet. So, for example, basically my routine, especially now that I'm working from home, I have to make sure that I slot in, time slots to make sure he gets exercise, to make sure he gets fed, to make sure he gets entertained. He's very needy because, of course, he's seeing me in the house now more often because I'm working from home. So he's really wondering, he's like, okay, why are you not paying attention? He thinks every day is a weekend. Yeah. So I've had to proactively make sure I slot him in. When I wake up in the morning, I make sure I walk him, I make sure he's fed, then I can start my day. So it's a lot of work, but also he keeps me upbeat because now I get to run with him in the morning. Yeah. So before, when I was sluggish with exercise, he's my companion, cheering me on. So it's a lot of fun. In the beginning, when there was a lot of social distancing, he got a bit moody because, he was not seeing people, he was not going outside. Yeah. And with time, we've actually just had to realize that we can't lock ourselves inside the house. We have to take him outside because we live in an apartment. We have to make sure he also, remembers how to socialize with people because, the past 2 months of COVID, he was not seeing anybody besides myself and my sister. And so when we'd occasionally have a guest, he would really bark, but now we're trying to make sure at least we responsibly get him to, see the outside and interact with people.
Yeah. The way you describe Peanut is a way that a lot of people would never look at or view an animal or their pet, so to speak. It's almost as if Peanut has a personality. Would you say that pets do have their own personalities? They are never usually the same?
Oh, yes. No pet is the same. He has his personality. Yeah. He has his moods. I know when he's happy. I know when he's sad. He also feeds off our energy a lot. Yeah. So everyone's pet is very different in their own way, you know. I actually have got to understand him in such a way that, you know, when we're walking and we come across another dog, I know whether he's aggressive or whether he's going to be friendly. Even when people approach him, I can really tell his behaviors.
All right, that's interesting. You know him so well. When it comes to animals, Dr. Emily, would you also describe some of these attachments to your pets or to animals unhealthy in a way? And what would you describe as an unhealthy relationship, you know, with your pet as an owner?
There are times when people, as you say, like in Europe, where somebody's living, they're single, or they're a couple and they don't want to have children, and the animal becomes their pet. It comes to a point where they go over the border, where they forget this is an animal. It has its own psychological needs. So now they tend to do what we call anthropomorphism, where we start thinking that the animal is like us, a human being. So we put our human attitudes, our human emotions, our human needs into the animal. And many a times, in some animals, it causes psychological effects.
Really? Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
And also at times, I said, it depends on your training, because she said she had to train Peanuts. We have some places where people have become so close to their animals that those animals have become overprotective of their human being, and no other person can come
close
near
to them,
near them. And then they have a very bad attitude to other dogs, because even if you have dogs are supposed to be trained to interact. So the dog almost has a human-like mentality that when it comes to other dogs, it will, you know, who are these, what are these, and it will not have that social interaction it's supposed to have with other dogs. So we human beings have to be very careful that we do not go over that border. Yes.
Okay. Renee, are you aware of these boundaries that Dr. Emily is talking about, that, you know, you don't cross to the other side, where now your attachment to Peanut doesn't become, you know, unhealthy, so to speak, in quotes? I mean, Peanut even has an Instagram page. Like, he's you have taken the time to post his activities and talk about him in the third person, you know. It's like
hey, I'm a marketer, so I have to commercialize everything in my life, okay? I am actually very aware about, handling Peanut and treating him like a human being. Because also there's the other angle that you look at it, that also if he thinks he's on the same level with you, he'll also manhandle you. You know, you have to also showcase that you're the leader of the pack. We are different. I'm a human. You're a dog. There's difference. And we really make that clear in terms of how we handle him. Like, for example, when we're eating dinner or having lunch, we don't eat with him. He has his eating time separate. When the humans are eating, we do our things very separate. And we're very clear that he can't also do certain things in the house. He has to behave. He's the dog in the house.
I mean, we see situations whereby, especially in the West, where people treat animals, like you said, just like human beings. I mean, you will have your pet pig sleeping in your bed, you know, in your bathtub. We see them, you know, really having a difficult time letting go of some of these animals should they pass or if they are taken away. Dr. Emily, why don't you tell us a little bit about some of this behavior that we see? I mean, is this now what we're talking about, just complete lack of awareness of these boundaries?
Yes. You'd be surprised that human beings have a need for love. And animals give you that love 100%. Even a cat that loves you according to its ideas, and like a dog that does it wholeheartedly. And because of that need for us human beings, especially if you're a human being who doesn't have friends, or you're in a situation where, like in Europe, where people live singularly, not like in Africa where you have community. When that animal gives you that uncharted love, you take it, and then unfortunately you make that animal the satisfier of your emotion and your emotional needs. So these things come into place where the animal ends up sleeping in your bed, taking a bath with you, eating on the same plate, which is totally wrong, both psychologically for you and the animal, but also health-wise in very many areas. And you see, what we don't understand is animals, have their own instincts on how their behavior has to be. So that what wraps things up. So now if a person, let's say the person dies before the human,
Right.
such an animal being given up for adoption into another home and into another setting where the people are going to treat it the way it is as an animal, many a times they can't fit into these settings. They
Right.
get depressed or they start misbehaving. And many of them at times, if they cannot be retrained, they unfortunately end up having to put down. So it
Yes.
causes a total negative reaction
Yeah.
at the end of the day for both the animal and the person. And if that animal dies before the person, many people go into a state of depression, and many of them, it's very hard to come out. And when they get a new animal which has not been adapted to the way that animal of yours has been adapted because it's new again, you kind of end up thinking that animal is wrong
Yeah.
and mistreating it and sending it back.
Yeah.
But you don't realize that what you caused earlier on may never be replicated,
Yeah.
or it has actually caused a negative impact on your psychology.
All right. Okay. Let's give our audiences the chance to, or rather our audience, contribute to this particular discussion. Of course, we still do have the question of the day. We believe it's been posted up on social media, but we want to share that with you as well on our screens. And we ask, do animals have any, or are they beneficial to the emotional well-being of humans? Do you believe that animals are beneficial to the emotional well-being of humans? And we ask you to send your feedback through our WhatsApp line. We will be taking a look at your feedback if there is any as we go along. But speaking about the emotional benefits of having an animal, because someone could be also toying with the idea, do I need to get a pet? How is it going to help me having a pet? Dr. Emily, what would you say are the benefits?
The benefits of having a pet is that unlike human beings where, Shiku, I love you, but when I have a bad mood, or if you have a bad mood, I can decide I'm not liking you and being rough on you.
Yeah.
Animals somehow manage to break that barrier, that even when you're upset and you're depressed, they will always be there and they'll push on until your mood changes. We have seen that dogs are used as emotional dogs for people who have had accidents,
Yeah.
soldiers who have come from war, kids who are autistic and cannot understand human emotions and learnings.
Yeah.
Dogs are trained because they have the patience to bridge that gap and help these autistic children come into the place where they're supposed to be. So psychologically, for a person, dogs have a calming effect,
Yeah.
and they have an encouraging effect, even cats. So that's why many a times in cases where people have emotional needs,
Right.
they're encouraged to have pets.
Renee, why do you think that there's such a low percentage of animal or pet owners, especially in this country, in Kenya, or in even Africa at large?
Well, I think it comes down to a lot of, it comes down to how we've been brought up. Most people in the African society, when they think about, dogs and cats, they think about dogs as just, security dogs. They don't think about it as a companion, something that you need to spend a lot of time with.
Yeah.
If you actually see most people's houses, they lock up their dog in a kennel. They don't socialize it. It gets out at night. Cats, usually you'll find, a cat just adopts itself. It just gets into a homestead, hangs around, and they don't really pay a lot of attention to it. So it has a lot to do with our upbringing,
Yeah.
especially when sometimes people visit me and they're like, oh my God, you have a dog in the house. I'm like, yes. And it's trained, it knows how to ask to go to the bathroom. It's very socialized, and they can't believe that because they only think about dogs as, security animals. In fact, when I'm walking the dog sometimes, you see people just trying to veer off because they are afraid.
Yeah.
Because they relate dog, security, vicious. Cat, it's a stray. It's a nuisance. So it's a lot to do with our upbringing.
Yeah. Do you get such remarks like, okay, Peanut is here to replace a void in your life? I don't know if you're married or if you have kids, but do some people feel like, okay, this closeness that you have with Peanut is probably trying to fill a void? I know someone who has about 10 to 15 cats in their home, and honestly, people would be like, what is wrong with you?
Well, a lot of people, especially like my aunts, sometimes when I go for family functions, we carry Peanut along.
Yeah.
And they're like, I think it's time for you to get a child. They keep giving those hints and whatnot. And I'm like, no, I'm perfectly comfortable. Things will happen in their due time.
Yeah.
I But subconsciously, of course, I just say, I hope I don't grow old and I'm in my 80s or 90s and I have like 10 dogs and 3 cats. Hope it will never happen to me. But yes, people actually judge you as a young single girl with a dog. Yeah. And they're like, you know, you need to get a man. But I mean, that's not why I have peanuts, you know, in my life.
Yeah, not feeling a void. Okay.
No, it's not feeling any void of a child or a man in my life, no.
Okay. You know, when you look at the role of animals in raising children, you kind of will be open to the idea of adopting a pet, Dr. Emily, because there's a way you can be able to teach children through owning a pet. And so let's talk about, in your opinion, what you think would be beneficial to a child's upbringing by having a pet in the home.
Before I go that, I'd like to backtrack on what we talked about pets, is that actually in Africa, pet ownership is very high. If you go to the rural areas, all boys have a dog. And you'd notice in the homestead, the watchdog and the dog of the children, is their attitudes are different because the child's dog is actually a pet. And in some of those rural areas, if the dog is a watchman, it is so close to the head of the house. Right. So when we define
it's only him who can handle that dog.
And they have this attachment. So I think when it comes to Africa, it's what we culturally define as a pet. If we put the Western idea of what cultural definition of what a pet, then we'll say we do not have pets in Africa. Right. But if we sit down and see the social cultural norms with dogs and cats up country, actually it may be a working dog, but many a times it is actually a pet. Wow. By the way, so it's how we put it. It's where our cultural norms between what we have in Africa and the West clash and how the definitions are. As for dogs, many people, it's encouraged, whether it's a dog or a cat, to have, because children need to learn responsibilities. Yes, and at times your parents are not always there. And if a child wants a dog and they're given their dog and they're trained that, okay, you have to wake up in the morning, take the dog out. If it's an apartment, take it out so it can go to the toilet, bring it back, wash its dishes, give it food. Yes, every 2 days, brush the dog if it's a long-haired dog. Every evening, make sure it has its food, it has its run. Make sure it is washed once a week. And those are the kids' responsibilities. It actually trains a kid responsibility. And also, for human beings, we don't understand that empathy is a learned trait. Right. So when we look at an adult and they're not empathetic, or there's some of these emotions that they don't hold, many of us reject and wonder what's wrong with this human being. But we don't understand those are traits that you learn from your childhood. They just don't come automatic. And animals, pets, whether it's a cat, a dog, or a bird, helps children develop those psychological and empathetic traits that we have later on in adulthood. Okay. All right. So let's hold that thought, because when we get back from our short commercial break, I will continue to be engaging Dr. Emily on the same as to why perhaps, especially if you're raising a child, why it could be beneficial for you to have that pet right in your household. And of course, Renee Kamau is going to be telling us all about how she, you know, goes about her schedule with Peanut Kamau. So we'll be talking to them in just a moment. But for now, keep talking to us through our social media platforms at K24 TV yet again, and through that WhatsApp number that's at the bottom of your screen. We're asking you if at all animals really do contribute to our emotional well-being. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Talk to us. We'll be back in just a moment.